In this video, we're going to run through the process of exporting a PSD document. So you'll notice that here in Substance Painter 2.3, we have this new Photoshop button. And what this is going to do is allow me to export to Photoshop. Now, this functionality is actually built through a Substance Painter plugin. So if I come up here to the top of the menu and I choose Plugins, notice that enabled, I have the Painter plugin Photoshop Export. And I have a few options here. So here I'm just going to bring over the Window Explorer, and notice here that under my Documents, Substance Painter 2 Plugins, you'll notice that we have this Painter plugin Photoshop Export folder. And within here is all of the Painter plugin files. Now, again, since this is a Painter plugin, that means that you can actually go in and you can change or make adjustments here to how this plugin works if you have some type of specific workflow that you want to tailor the export to. So here back in Painter, just going back up to the plugins, let's take a look here at the configuration panel. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is set your path to Photoshop. And I've done that here, so all I've had to do is just click this Set Path button and then just browse for the Photoshop EXE, wherever you have that installed on your system. And by default, you'll notice that this Launch Photoshop After Export is enabled. What this means is that once Painter has exported the map, it's then going to launch Photoshop, where a script is going to run, which is then going to rebuild the Painter layer stack as a PSD document. Also, by default, we have this enable padding. So in this case, I'm just going to disable this. And here we have export bit depth. And by default, it's set here to the texture set value. If we click this button, we can change this to 8 or 16 bit. I'm just going to leave it to the texture set value, and I'll click save. So just one other note in terms of padding. If I just right click and choose export textures. So new in Substance Painter 2.3, we now have the option to change the padding type as well as the pixels for the dilation. So here I'm just going to cancel that. So here you'll notice that I have a project, and I'm going to use this as the example here for my export. And what I want to do is take this layer stack, and I want to be able to create this as a PSD document. And then all I have to do is just come over here and just click this Photoshop button. So now you'll see that behind the scenes, Painter is starting to just compile the maps. Once these maps are exported, it's going to open up Photoshop because, again, that's a setting that I had enabled in my configuration. And then it's going to rebuild a PSD document for each one of the channels that I have here in my texture set settings. So again, each channel, such as base color, roughness, metal, these channels are going to become their own PSD document. So here you'll notice that Photoshop is now starting up. And now the script is running, and you can see here in real time that the layers of the Photoshop document are starting to be constructed, and it's going to match what I have in my Substance Painter layer stack. So here our base color's done, and now we're moving on to height. You'll see here that the height and normal blending are not accurate. All of the correct information is there. The issue is that Photoshop doesn't support all of the blending modes that we have in Painter, so we're just not able to match them. So now we're writing the Photoshop format, and all of the documents have been created. So we're just going to jump over here to our base color. Again, just want to point out that each channel, here we have base color, height, here's our roughness, metallic, and our normal is its own Photoshop document. So here, we're going to jump back over to our base color, and we're going to take a look at the Photoshop layers versus the Substance Painter layer stack. So here I'm back in Substance Painter, and I'm just going to hit C on the keyboard to go into my solo channel mode here. And notice that we're looking at our base color. Here you can see in our 2D view that we get an exact result from what we've created here in Substance Painter to what we're actually getting inside of Photoshop. So now let's take a look at the layer stack. So a couple things that I want to point out. Notice here that I have this dirt layer. And here at the very top, where I have my dirt, we have the blending mode here set to multiply, and the opacity is set here to 86. Now, most of the common blending modes that we have are going to transfer directly. However, we can't match all of the blending modes. So again, just kind of your most common ones are going to translate correctly. But just keep in mind that you may have to make an adjustment there. So here, let's jump back over to Photoshop and take a look at how this dirt layer is being handled. So here we are in Photoshop. here we have our dirt layer. Notice that the blending mode is set to multiply and our opacity is set to 86, which is correct. And here we also have our layer mask, which is a rasterized or compiled version of the layer mask that we created in Painter with some masking effects. So let's take a look at that. So here we are in Painter, and I have just enabled here my dirt so that we can view this. And here again, you can see that we get the same result between Photoshop and Substance Painter. The filter effects that I'm using here are generators such as the dirt, ground dirt, and this bitmap here. These guys are all basically just rasterized so that what we get is just a layer mask there in Photoshop. So another thing that I want to point out is here at the very top, I have just a paintable layer. So this is just a standard layer. And I've applied here this sharpen filter because I just want to overall sharpen the result of what I'm getting here out of my layer stack. And so here is the filter, the sharpen filter. And what I have here is this sharpen effect here has pass-through enabled for base color. Now my other channel, it is also enabled here for my roughness and my metallic. However, my normal map here, I have it disabled. Same thing with my height, I believe. Yes, so I have it disabled. So here we have this, again, this sharpen effect. And with it set to pass through here in the Substance Painter layer stack, basically then going to apply this sharpen down the layer stack here. Now what happens is that when you have something like this set up and you export this over to Photoshop, what you're going to see is that this layer is going to become rasterized. So let's take a look at that in Photoshop. So here we are in Photoshop, and here at the top we see again that sharpen layer as a rasterized effect. And you can simply just disable this or, adjust opacity and so on. So for now, let me just disable this sharpen layer. And I want to just come down here towards the bottom, and you'll see that I created another layer similar to the sharpen, which I called hue adjustment. So if I just disable this, you can see that I used this layer here as just a hue adjustment layer, basically. And again, since I used a hue adjustment filter inside of Painter on a standard layer that's using the pass-through blending modes, I get this layer here in the Photoshop document that's just a rasterized effect of that hue adjustment. So here I'll jump over to Substance Painter and just let you see how that was set up. So again, here is the hue adjustment layer here in Substance Painter, just a standard layer. Notice that I have this hue saturation. In this case, I just have the pass-through enabled for my base color. This is just one way that you can work with these filters. I've done it this way so that, again, when I export the PSD document, these effects are going to be, rasterized as their own layer, which means I can disable them if I want to in the Photoshop document. However, if you were to take something like, let's just say, this fill here that we have, or again, any effects that I'm placing here on the mask. So for example, let's just come over here and let's add a filter here. And let's just say that we added in a hue saturation in this case, and then we made some adjustments. Now on the export, this filter is basically going to be merged right into this layer. So you are going to have the hue saturation, but it's basically just going to be merged down into this layer. So if it's something that you do want to keep on its own layer, something you want to have the ability to enable or disable, just create a standard layer and again, use the filter with the pass-through blending modes. So just a couple things to mention. The scripts are actually compiling the PSD document here, but the PSD document hasn't been saved yet. So what you'll need to do is just come over to File, Save As, and then you can save this to any location that you would like. Any of the channels that represent color, such as our base color here, are going to have a custom sRGB profile. Now, the reason for that is that Photoshop does everything in sRGB. For the grayscale channels, like our roughness and our metallic, that's going to work just fine. But for color channels, we need to make an adjustment. Now, since Painter blends in linear space, the script sets up the PSD doc to blend in linear. So here, if I come over to Edit and I go to Assign Profile, you'll notice here that, again, for maps that represent color, such as base color, the profile is utilizing this custom sRGB. And then here, for an example, we'll take a look at a grayscale document channel here. So here's our roughness, and we'll go to Edit, Assign Profile. And here you can see that, this isn't using a custom sRGB. So just to reiterate that, color documents are going to be blending in linear space. So that's going to take care of this video on how the Photoshop export functionality works in Substance Painter 2.3. As you can see, it's a pretty straightforward process. The only area you can run into an issue is with blending modes. Just remember that Photoshop doesn't support all of the blending modes that we have in Painter, so we're not able to match them in the export. You may need to make adjustments in Photoshop or just stick to the more common blending modes such as multiply, overlay, and subtract, for example.